I'm Emilie Lunt, and I believe with my whole heart and soul that our homes are places where we can seek and love the truth, celebrate beauty, and learn good things every single day. That's why I'm educating my kids at home, and I know you can do it too. Welcome to Heart and Soul Homeschool. Charity Parenzin, welcome to Heart and Soul Homeschool. I'm so happy that we could figure out a time to do this. You're a busy lady.
Well, you're super diligent to keep after me. I'm actually thrilled to do this. This is in my wheelhouse. I miss it. I'm actually usually in your shoes, honestly. So this is great. Thank you for having
I'm
me.
going to kind of turn the tables today. So, you are the founder of Ignite Creative School in Montana. So, tell us
Yes.
about that. That is probably not what you thought you would be doing at this point in life, right?
Oh no, no. So I'll start by saying I have three sons. And if you had told me the day my first son was born that I would ever homeschool any child I ever had, I would laugh at you. I would have laughed in your face. I would have told you you're crazy. That was never something I saw myself doing. I didn't know about it. I thought that was for people who ran ranches and yes, let the stereotypes fly. But I think we all go on a journey with our kids and we see the world that God created, just going further and further away from Him. And this is the time in history they've been born in, that we've been born in. And for the protection of my kids, uh, for very different reasons, the two sons in particular, I decided that homeschooling was the way to go, but they needed community. And I started an art group, and that art group was quite small. It was during COVID. And the short version is out of that initial fellowship with other homeschool families, I actually had someone approach me to start a school. There's a lot to that story, but I'll just skip to the chase in that I at first said, no, 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 that's not me, that's someone else. I'll support you. And after praying with my husband and talking and going back through dreams I'd had over the years of how I wanted to school my kids, a school I wished existed for my kids, we decided to start a hybrid homeschool, uniting families with their educators and really supporting families in their homeschool education. And essentially, we are able to partner with families, cheer them on, they're cheering us on as we raise kids in an extremely tumultuous time in history and surround them with a community that they can be with and feel safe.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I love that you laid that out so beautifully because so many of the things that exist in the homeschool community today are a result of moms creating things that they wish they had for their kids. And so I love that spirit among homeschool families. If it's not there, we're going to make it. And
Yeah.
you have created something that I think is really unique in this space. So let's kind of back up a little bit. You mentioned that it's a hybrid school. So maybe give us just a quick overview for those who might not know what a hybrid schooling model looks like.
Excellent question. So I'll be honest, I was familiarized with this based on a school about 3 hours north of where I live. And essentially, what a hybrid school is kids come physically to a school location 2 or 3 days a week, and then the other days of the week, they're at home doing their homeschool with their families in their house, in their environment. So, how that works is parents are able to offset instruction, grading, and even just being the main teacher in a lot of these subjects by allowing us to help take the lead in that. But parents are still considered the primary educator according to the state. We choose curriculums based on feedback of our parents oftentimes, or at least the needs of our students. So that's how it works. They come 2 or 3 days a week to us, and then they're home the rest of the time.
Yeah, it's such a neat model because it kind of alleviates some of those worries and pressures that parents feel. Financially, it's great for families where, maybe the mom needs to work part time and can't be home all the time. It's great for
Mhm.
people who worry about the socialization, who just want those opportunities, kind of like the sweet parts of school, but not all the other junk that goes with it. So it's a really neat model that I think a lot of people find really attractive. A lot of the hybrid schools that I'm familiar with around here are the classical model. And so
Yeah.
that's part of what caught my attention with you, Charity, is you're not.
I'm not. Just essentially, I, as Charity, the student, once upon a time, probably would have done well in a classical school. I enjoyed being challenged. I enjoyed learning history. I love literature. I love all those things. However, I feel like as a creative person, that's my background. I'm a professional media director and producer, and I was a professional actor for over 30 years. I do voiceover. I do all sorts of things. Once upon a time, I guess I shouldn't say I really do that much anymore. I grew up in a highly creative field, and yet I was surrounded by entrepreneurial people. I was surrounded by high achievers. I certainly wasn't someone who was comfortable sitting around doing nothing. I think creativity was something that was so essential to my own childhood survival, if I'm being really transparent. I feel like God was healing me in real time through creativity, whether it was making up stories or being able to just sit and escape through imagination, whether it was acting, singing was a huge part of my childhood. And I'm seeing schools, even in the Christian realm, do less and less and less creativity. So what I really wanted to focus on at our school is how can we fit as much creativity, problem solving, critical thinking, all these wonderful things into school without sacrificing what kids are required to learn under the state requirements, of course, by law, or just holding to the same standard that you would if your child's progressing through their education and, of course, wanting to graduate on time and go to college if they want to do such a thing. So the core of our school is actually centered around thinking outside the box. So what we do in the morning is our required core, and then in the afternoons, it's traditionally the afternoons anyway, we do what's called a journey. And a journey is a 2 to 2 hour and 15-minute chunk of time where they are focused on one creative thing for a month. So whether it's baking for a month, those days of the week that they're doing that, they're just focused for 2 hours and 15 minutes on that. Whether it's fine arts, drama, music, script writing, filmmaking, photography, we're working now into production work, podcasting, different things. These kids are saturated with that one thing, learning one thing at a time for that longer period of time so that they can really learn to be self-expressive. These kids have come into such confidence because of that. They have to express themselves. They have to get what's in their head out. And that's a skill that's being lost because usually in traditional models of school, even in the Christian realm, what we're more prioritizing is getting what the teacher wants in rather than what's going on in here out. And I think you need both. I think we need both. And so to balance that out, we do our core in the morning, we do our journey in the afternoon. And it's been a very successful model for the kids and the families. And we're working towards expanding that even next year by offering after-school programs.
Yeah, it's really phenomenal. And as I was listening to you talk about the arts and that expression, I think these times you mentioned, these are tumultuous times that we live in. And wow, I mean, they sure are. And so when I think about the arts in our time, they have been so co-opted by the world and values that as moms, you and I don't really want our kids immersed in that. And yet our kids are creative and those are God-given abilities. And so it's really, really inspiring and intriguing to me that you're sort of recognizing that. I think this is sort of, I don't know if we should call it groundbreaking, but it's a different way to think about it for me because you know, we do want to cultivate those gifts and they are skills that all kids need, whether, you know, you would have a typically creative or artistic, like God put creativity in all of us. And it's such, it is such a need for us to learn how to use that, whatever that looks like. And so I think it's such a cool model that you're working out there.
Absolutely. I think if I'm going to be transparent, when I went on this deep dive of I'm starting a school, I told the Lord, like, I don't want to do a traditional school. I don't want to do the public school model with Jesus on top. And I don't want to do the factory version of school, which is really what we do in most places in America. Classical school, although it has its place, I feel just for me and I can only speak to me. I know many wonderful classically educated families this is not where they are at. But for me as a creative, it can feel very dogmatic at times. It can feel very, there's only one way to do it the right way. And I feel like that's just not the field I grew up in. That's not success I found as an adult is you have to be a problem solver. You have to look at things different ways from different angles. Yes, we want to teach our children objective truth, but even within that world of objective truth, sometimes you can all reach the same destination taking different paths. It forces kids to work in teams. It's also what's called a hand-on learning model. So even though creativity is really the crux of it, it's really known as a project-based learning center. And the reason is even within that core class time, we do quarterly projects. We don't do a lot of testing. We do projects. We certainly do work that they have to turn in and get graded. Yes, the older kids are doing essays, but we do a lot of project-based learning. It allows kids the freedom to really invest more time, to know the quality of work they're turning in. That feels really good. That's also true as an adult. We should know the quality of work we're turning in. It brings them pride to stand in front of their peers and present what they did, explain it, walk it through. They're learning communication. If anything's being lost today, it's creativity and communication skills. So we really want to bring that back in a way that accentuates learning. And that's really how we decided to do it, was through high creativity, which happens to just easily translate over 99% of the time into a project of some kind. We had high schoolers approach us this year and they said, hey, we really want to grow our wings here creatively. Really liked the filmmaking class. Would there be a way that we could create a podcast? And I giggle a little bit because I said, well, you have to first start with content quality. And they're like, what? Isn't it just 2 microphones, people chatting? And I'm like, no. So they're having to learn a lot of communication skills, prioritization of how they want to communicate. But back to your point about the Lord, in this era, what may mean the difference between learning about Jesus Christ and not is going to come from the way we communicate and express ourselves. I firmly believe that a song on the radio about wrestling through life and how hard it can be, and then about the hope that Christ brings, might very well be the final link of bringing someone to the Lord quicker than me dragging my neighbor into church that they may never allow me to do and listening to a sermon. So if we can create as Christians high quality creative work, it's going to naturally draw anyone to it that at least appreciates the artistry of it, the creativity of it, and then they're going to get curious about the message behind it. And I really feel like this is going to be a way to bring people to Christ that we used to do, but I feel like we abandoned it. We abandoned that high quality art somewhere along the way. And like you said, whether the world co-opted it or we handed it over, it happened, and we need to get it back. And we only will get it back when we allow our children to express themselves creatively and really put a high standard on that.
Yeah, I agree. And, when you think about the cathedrals of, hundreds of years ago and the beauty of the church music that worldwide had such an impact on culture, for hundreds of years. And then you're right. It seems like we just, like you said, whether we handed it over, just let it happen, that quality and the beauty of our faith and of our Savior and all of those good things, the expression of that is amazing. So one thing, as you're talking about these journeys, the other thing that kind of caught my eye about you, Charity, is you deal with older kids, which is such an incredible ministry, I think, within the homeschool world, because so many of the programs that are springing up now, as more and more families join the ranks of homeschool families, are for younger kids. And I have several friends who have kids sort of at that transition point, maybe like 5th, 6th grade, where those things that they were doing just aren't quite fitting as well as they used to. And they're really trying to figure out, how do we transition well into these middle and high school years? And what you're offering seems to just be an incredible model that I'm so encouraged by. So tell us a little bit about why you chose to do that.
Oh, that's such a good question. One, I'll be honest, my oldest 2 were already in high school, and when I started, officially we did the ribbon cutting, so to speak, and started the school. My oldest was not in a place where he wanted to come and be the token oldest only 11th grader. So he actually tried online school and a combination of like 2 classes physically at a local Christian school, and then he worked online. That's another conversation for another day. I think online school has its place, but it was very lonely for him and his community. But he was here physically. He was just working in either what we call the quiet room or the kitchen. However, I'd already passed the younger's years, and I just needed to be realistic about, number one, where am I at where my kids can come with me? And number 2, it was really logistical. I didn't have the latitude or the space to accommodate K through 12. A third reason really is I hated middle school, but I really like middle schoolers. And so I was like, okay, I kind of feel like I can do this age group. So I limited it that first year to fifth grade and up. Transparency, the only reason I even allowed fifth grade was because my baby was in fifth grade last year. And it was my hardest class in the beginning of the year because wow, were they like little puppies. Because when you hand someone freedom, and you don't rule with an iron fist. Be quiet, sit down, don't do this. And there's nothing, there's structure is important. Like you can't manage a classroom without structure. But we didn't rule with an iron fist, and they were experiencing freedom. And they were like, wait, I have the freedom to choose if I'm working or not. I have the freedom to choose. I'm like, well, you can't distract anyone else. So that they were hard in the beginning, but they became my best class by the end. But I was just like, once they're through, I'm only doing middle school, high school. That didn't end up happening. We still accepted fifth grade this year, but I will say that older group is in a very different place than the littles. The littles are usually more compliant. Parents will agree, even if they don't like it. I'm not saying they're perfect. I'm not saying they don't huff and puff, but they'll tend to still respect the authority of their parent, at least to a large degree. Those middle school years, they desire independence, but they can't quite have it yet. They're not ready, but that's the desire of their heart. So to walk alongside homeschool families and say like, hey guys, this is how we're teaching them. We're teaching them consequences to action. And it's a lot easier for mom and dad to hand a little of that responsibility over to a third party who's like, well, what are you gonna do? Just yesterday, I had a student come to me and say, I left my binder at home, which has all of his work in it. We have a binder system. And all I said to him was, oh gosh, what are you going to do? And he came up with a fabulous solution, actually. And I was like, that sounds great. Let's do that. If mom and dad were put in the same position, they would handle it differently, or they may not respect the fact that they're being given ownership. For mom and dad to just hand that over is so nice. But again, I think it's a multifaceted answer. One, I really feel like that's where the need was, and I wasn't about reinventing the wheel. Whenever you start a business, even if it's for ministry, you have to look at the ROI and you have to look for the gaps. And the huge gap was middle school, high school. And the ROI was really going to be on, can I meet the needs of these families in a way that I can promise on a piece of paper and execute in real life? So I didn't want to overpromise and underdeliver. And I really felt that for me, my wheelhouse was middle school, high school. So I played to my strengths and I saw the need, and it just happened to be a good fit.
Yeah, and I think it's so exciting too, Charity, because I think when I listen to families talk about, oh, should we homeschool, should we not? The middle school and high school years are the part that families have trouble envisioning. It seems really, really hard. So I think it's relatively easy for us to think, I can teach my child their numbers and their letters. I can figure out what first grade, second grade math looks like. But those later years
100%.
kind of seem intimidating when you're just starting out. And so I think it's beautiful to see that vision for those older years, whether families choose to start something similar to Ignite or, something totally different. Just seeing people who are doing it, it's working. Kids are successful in this model. It's beautiful that they have the opportunity to explore learning. And one of the things that you have that's part of your mission is that you want to create self-propelled learners, which is the perfect time. We lay that groundwork in the little years, right? But when it can really take off are those older elementary and high school, middle school ages. And so it's exciting. You get to see the fruit of it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I know this wonderful homeschool mom that she was a part of our school last year, and then they moved. She was only here just a small amount of time before they moved, but she said she had already graduated 2 homeschoolers out of high school. One was graduated last spring from the university here, and her son is finishing up this year his education, and she's on her 3rd. And then her 4th was actually the one who came to our school, her baby. And she said, if you teach them right, they can log their own hours, their own homeschool hours. They can keep track of all the logistics. They can work in a system that works for them. You may have to help set up the system, or the school in this case might help set up the system. I'm in my classroom right now, and I was literally just today meeting with parents for what we call a parent-teacher check-in. We do it in the fall. And I was getting some fabulous feedback. Feedback's super important if you ever want to start a hybrid homeschool. You're co-laboring with families. You want to set high structure in a good way, but within that structure and those boundaries, you have to be flexible to the needs of the community. Because even if you have this grandiose idea, if 80% of the kids are confused or 80% of the kids, the system's not working, you have to be pliable. But I was listening to their feedback, and basically what they were saying was similar to what you're saying, is their older kids are now, after being here a year, being far more self-propelled. And yet, when they have questions, they were just trying to help me with a system so that they could make sure that those older learners are still working within the guidelines of what we set down as the need. So they were giving me feedback on how much, how detailed this list of their assignments was, or they were giving me feedback on just how one of their sons processes information and how they understand my list. But if we're wanting to create self-propelled learners, and mom and dad can maybe review stuff with them because they're not checked out, but that maybe the better way to communicate is actually adjusting on age to create that self-propelled learner. So when they read their sheet versus a high schooler reading their sheet, it still says the same information in their mind. And so that's something that's hard to recognize even for me sometimes. Right, I treat them like they're capable, but when they're in sixth grade, they're still learning how to take ownership of their education. Well, by the fourth week of school in high school, they get it. They lock in the system, they adjust how the teacher communicates, versus the littles, they can't always adjust even though they're in middle school. So yes, I love the idea of self-propelled learners. I want them to be life learners. I want them to keep their curiosity. I get them involved in decisions about the school. What color should we paint this wall? What should we do here? Do you guys like this here or here? These little choices they get to help me make that seem insignificant, they love it because it creates investment. It creates a heart attachment. It also makes them see, wait, I have decisions and I have an investment here. This matters to me. I'm going to voice my opinion. They come to a place where their opinion matters. And in a lot of traditional schools, if I'm being really frank, their opinion doesn't matter. Everything's being delivered to them. Everything's being told to them. They show up. A system's already in place. It ain't going anywhere. And again, I'm not even saying that's bad, but if we want our children to be invested in learning, we have to make it to where they feel like their voice matters. And I feel like that's something our school really does well at.
Yeah. And also just listening to you talk about that, that when we just give them everything, when we tell them everything, it doesn't prepare them for real life, right? And so those decisions that you were saying you let them be a part of, those are real life decisions, and some of them more groundbreaking than others, but you do figure out, if I put this in this place in my house, is that an efficient way of living? All of those things do prepare you for real life. And also just raising your opinion, my goodness. Go back to the tumultuous times we live in, Charity. Like, we need to be raising little warriors. You and I talked about this a little bit when we chatted a few weeks ago when we were getting this scheduled. My goodness, what a time to be raising kids who know how to think, who know how to weigh out the situation and say, I don't think that's quite right. And so I'm going to take my stand on this. What you're doing is amazing. It's so encouraging. We're going to break here, and you've agreed to come back for a part 2, and we're going to totally switch gears to your other line of work.
Oh, and hold on to your hats, friends.
Yes, it's so excited. So really quick, if people want to learn more about Ignite and what you're doing there, we'll link to the website and your Instagram. Absolutely. Is there anywhere else that I should be sending people?
No, I would just say if you have questions about starting your own hybrid homeschool, I will try to field those, but be patient with me. But I encourage that. And maybe if there's ever a time, I can get together with parents and just do a Zoom call. If you're listening to this and this is your heart, and you have the entrepreneurial mindset that I came through the door with, having had life experience, and God is just working on your heart, oh my gosh, this sounds like something I want to do. I just want to encourage you that we all as a community, we are called to, in these last days, to tell people about Jesus, and this may be the very way that God's calling you. So I just want to encourage you not to give up on it, and I just want to say, reach out to me, but just be a little patient, because if you're not my parent or my student, I just have to write back accordingly. But I see you, and I'll just say you can write to Ignite Learn Create at proton.me, and I'll do my best to get back to you as soon as possible.
No, that's such a generous offer, and I know that our listeners are inspired. So Charity, hang on, and we'll get to part 2 here for everyone else. I hope that you'll join me next week with Charity for the next episode of Heart and Soul Homeschool.
Heart and Soul Homeschool is a podcast presentation of the Herzog Foundation. The views and opinions expressed on the show are those of the host and guests and not necessarily the views of the Herzog Foundation. Be sure to like and subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode of Heart and Soul Homeschool.